Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show, Red Pill Edition. My name is Leon Jones, and in this segment, I'm going to talk about the black community and selective outrage. So, the title of this morning's video is There's Black Community Selective Outrage when it comes to crime. There is black community selective outrage when it comes to crime. Now, rest in peace, Brother Floyd, who was murdered by some police officers in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it is a tragedy. But it is also a tragedy when it comes to African American people with the selective outrage. Because if you talk about protesting, many African Americans are protesting by tearing up their own communities. They're looting. What does a 65 or 70-inch TV have to do with this brother who was murdered by police officers? And as black people, we have to be accountable for what we do. Now, there are a lot of videos going around regarding this Brother Floyd murder by two police officers. There's a lot of selective outrage going on. Now, this was unjustified. We all know it. But the bottom line is, where is all of this protesting when black people are murdering each other in urban areas? Now, I did a blog talk radio show for about an hour and 15 minutes. You can check that out on my Facebook and Twitter page. That's my blog talk radio show. And me and a brother talked about these issues. And there were some cities that had high black on black crime I didn't know about, like West Memphis, Arkansas, Texarkana, Texas, Texarkana, Arkansas. But it seems to me we black folk come together when it is somebody white who destroys us, but we don't come together for each other. I don't hear any outrage for black on black crime from these pastors. Again, I said this in my last video. Pastors are leaders. We're not showing any leadership. Now, as far as the bystanders, should some of the bystanders participate, or should they have participated? That's a question of whether you're willing to fight or not, because believe it or not, we are at civil war in this country. A number of people aren't paying attention. And the civil war is between traditional and secularism. And right now, the secularists are driving the narrative. You have people like Joe Biden saying that if you don't vote for Democrats, you ain't black. Well, let me tell you about the Democratic Party right now. We all know they're the party of the Klan. But a lot of your Democrats are running your urban areas. And a number of your Democrats are black Democrats. They have corruption in their heart, just like white politicians. A number of your black Democrats, particularly in the Congressional Black Caucus, do not believe in the Second Amendment. They do not believe in First Amendment rights. They believe in their speech. In fact, you had Twitter, who wanted to fact check Donald Trump when he tweets information out. But if a lefty says something, nothing happens. You see that on YouTube. When the truth is told, videos get flagged. When nonsense that's of the narrative of the left is told, it's okay. The bottom line that I'm telling we black folk out there, whether you're from the streets, whether you're from the suburbs, whether you're educated or uneducated, at the end of the day, we got a fight on our hands. And we don't have anybody but each other. And I don't care where you are in life as a black person, you're still black. Now, of course, many of us talk about slavery. We need to talk about the 1960s, because as black men, we should have fought against the government allowing black women to go on welfare. Because when that happened, that kicked the black man out of the house. We should have fought against the affirmative action that allowed black women to become a double minority when it came to jobs. This is where all the attitudes and the animosity between black men and black women developed. But we're not looking at that. And one thing I can tell you about us as African American people, many of us don't trust each other. We will go spend our money on other businesses, but we have envy and jealousy with each other when it comes to us having our own, because some of us in the African American community don't want to have our own. Many of us are comfortable being victims. But at the end of the day, when it comes to police shootings, they happen. White men get shot by police. But the lack of outrage when it comes to black on black crime, that's a problem. And something else that's killing black people: abortions. Since 1970, I believe 20 million abortions of black kids have taken place. This is from the system that late Margaret Sanger created, when she said black people are basically worthless. And if you go in every black community, there's a Planned Parenthood. Hillary Clinton called black people predators. But one thing I know about black people, a number of them, regardless of what you tell them, they are going to push that lever for the Democrat. Now, that video that I saw regarding that interview with Joe Biden and Charlemagne the God from the Breakfast Club should tell you a lot about black people. Joe Biden is taking the black vote for granted. If you look at Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill, that bill put a lot of black men in jail. And of course, we know black men make up 40% of the prison population. But being out in the streets, and I'm out here every day, there's a lot going on with us. Look at Chicago. Chicago had a number of shootings over the Memorial Day weekend, but that's not surprising. It's happened every year since I've been out here in the state of Indiana. Indianapolis has a number of shootings. Smaller cities under 500,000, such as Cincinnati, Ohio, Cleveland, they have problems. Detroit, Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas, Boston, Miami, New Orleans, St. Louis, Milwaukee. Wherever you see a large population of African Americans, you're going to have poverty, you're going to have violence, single mothers, you're going to have Democrats running those areas. These Democrats, whether they be black or white, they don't care about black people. They just want black people's votes. You look at all these churches, have these pastors, and nobody is looking at this black pastor. He takes African American women for granted. He takes their money, and then he indoctrinates them with a bunch of BS. And a number of African Americans believe it because they believe in God so much. But here's the problem with African Americans, and this is where I'm going with the selective outrage as well. When it comes to politics, many of us African Americans socially are conservative. But when you go and vote Democrat, you're voting for secularism. You're voting for abortion. You're voting for feminism. You're voting for homosexuality. You're voting for a welfare state. And one thing that disturbs me about African Americans, they keep taking their orders from these white liberals. The people who want to keep you in chains, like Joe Biden said when Obama was getting elected in 2012, he talked about, you vote Republican, the Republicans are going to keep you in chains. Well, the Democratic Party has already kept African Americans in chains. But too many African Americans don't see it. Now, being part of this civil war out here means you need to have some type of wealth. Now, when it comes to African Americans, the only thing that we hear about from politicians is we need jobs. Okay, that's fine. But what about entrepreneurship? What about us creating jobs? See, when I hear the word jobs, a job stands for just off broke. Most people who have a job are broke. They're living payday to payday because they pay a lot of taxes. The cost of goods and services keep going up. But at the end of the day, I don't hear anything about owning something. You have all these millionaire rappers and basketball players coming out, and they're African American, telling you how bad the system is, but yet they're getting paid good. But here's the problem with the LeBron Jameses and the John Legends. They get a lot of money, but they're still, just like me, an employee. And being an employee, you got to take orders from the boss. Because if you don't like the rules of your employer, you're going to have to get something else. But at the end of the day, some of these high-profile black celebrities don't own anything. Now, we as African Americans, regardless of where you're from, particularly the African American male, what we need is to understand politics. I mean, other races understand that if you want an economy for yourself, you need representatives. Now, the Asians don't have too many representatives. Now, as far as the Italians and the Jewish individuals, some of those minorities came over here with their own money. But when it comes to African Americans, many of us talk about slavery so much. And here on YouTube, what's appalling, many African American brothers are still talking about women all day. At the end of the day, we need to set that aside and report on what's going on around us. Because right now, women aren't the problem. The economy is the problem. Politics is the problem. Black on black crime is a problem. Poverty is a problem. The education system is a problem. The media is a problem. And religion is a problem. But there are not too many brothers talking about these problems. Right now, the unemployment rate, because of this COVID-19, is pretty high. 40 million people have applied for unemployment in the last 10 weeks. And for us as African Americans, I know the unemployment rate is even higher because many African Americans come from the urban areas. And that brings me to my next point. When the white folk protested in Michigan, their protest was peaceful. But when the black folk protest, particularly in areas like Baltimore and Ferguson, and of course Minneapolis, over a shooting or a murder of a black man, we destroy the community. Well, Walgreens, Target, the small businesses in that community that you purchase goods and services from or where you work aren't the problem. The problem is the system. It just, like I said in previous videos, many of us need to get involved in politics. Many of us need to get involved in STEM. Many of us need to get involved in the military. You don't have to make a career out of the military, but the military offers structure. Right now, when it comes to the African American community, many of us have a savage behavior. And that savage behavior is against each other. Now, one big problem that I see when something is happening to African Americans is many of us who are at the scene aren't jumping in to do anything. We're just taking pictures with our phones. Okay, the phone is a good source, you have video. But when it comes to situations such as the cops, African Americans need to start looking at the Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Because remember something, law enforcement, and I'm not against law enforcement, I'm against corruptive law enforcement. You still need law enforcement, and there are good officers out here. I met quite a few. But many of us aren't carrying that same energy for black on black crime or for abortion, like this case. Now, unfortunately, it's a horrific case if you saw that video. I wish some of the bystanders jumped in. And you know, something else that no one knows about, and I saw a video the other day where a police officer dragged a black woman out of a car in Michigan, picked her up, and they were beating on that black woman. The husband tried to join in, and they tased him. But there was another black man who was walking in red shorts. He didn't do anything. Now, I know a number of African Americans come from the street. Some of them are tough. Some of them act tough. I know they're scared. But you have to ask yourself this. Do you want freedom or tyranny? Because when it comes to the African Americans, many of us talk about the black issues. We know what the problem is. But two things are around us. Either we don't know how to solve the problem, or we won't solve the problem. And I don't care if you live in the hood or in the suburbs. At the end of the day, we're all black. We're all we have. Many of us will show our anger and violent rage toward one another. But we won't go out there and fight the system. Again, we have a number of African Americans in jail, particularly male. Now, one thing I will say with some of these gangs out here, looks like the OGs have called for a truce. They know what's going on out there. They know you go kill each other, you lose soldiers. And there is structure within the gangs. But too often, too many black men have killed each other over some Jordans, some colors, part of a street that they didn't own, that the taxpayers paid for, a woman. Too many women, black women, trying to act like men. They have a high abortion rate. Talk about African American women. Black men and women are getting abused by the system, but we're afraid to fight the system. You see, when you go to war, you're going to have to get blood on your hands. And many of us are willing to fight each other in these urban areas. We get blood on our hands, but the crimes are always senseless. And we got bigger fish to fry right now. We're in the middle of a war, a civil war, that's basically secular, which is progressive Marxism, versus traditional, which is freedom. And in the voting booth, I get a little worried that too many African Americans are going to listen to what these white liberals say, because these white liberals run the narrative, because they have all the corporations, they have all of the media, they own all of the social media, they own all of the sports teams, all of the record labels, and they have all the money. And money is power. We don't have the power. And the only way we are going to get power is we are going to have to get involved with the political process. I myself thinking about running for some type of county council. And if you're going to get into politics, you have to start locally. And that's another thing. When it comes to us as African Americans, we don't know how to disagree with each other. We're very emotional. But we call everything white supremacy. I'm not saying there's no racism out here. But people that you need to call out are the black pastors. And then you have these pro-blacks out here. These pro-blacks don't care about you. These pro-blacks are making money off of our suffering. They are. They talk about what's wrong out here, but they're part of the problem. Again, these pastors out here. Pastors want money. They're not preaching the Bible. These pastors are just utilizing indoctrination. And see, this is what Margaret Sanger did when she had developed Planned Parenthood. She didn't run into black churches and tell black people they're horrible people. No, she got a smooth-talking pastor to do it. But he minced his words properly so he sounded calm and he could make African Americans feel good. But at the end of the day, if you look at what's going on with African Americans, there is no outrage when it comes to black on black crime. Again, The FBI statistics will tell you 52% of the homicides are black on black crime. And most of the homicides take place in urban areas. And these urban areas are run by liberals, black liberals at that. But I don't see us with any outrage. That's why our outrage is selective. In fact, there's more black on black crime than white cop on black killings. But a number of us African Americans don't want to see that because we watch the videos on what's going on to get us enraged emotionally. But rationally, we're not looking at the overall scheme of things. The scheme is you have a number of white liberals who want to keep African Americans depending on government. That is the big problem. And many brothers and sisters are happy with just having a job. They're happy with just having an education. But that doesn't get it done. We have to fight for everything we have. And in order to fight, we need to get more educated on how the system works. We need to drop all the envy and jealousy that we have for one another, because at the end of the day, when it comes to black men, I don't care if you're a Pookie and Ray Ray or an educated lame, however the names are phrased, we're all men. And we got to fight for our freedom. And when it comes to laws out here, laws are only for law-abiding citizens. They're not for criminals. That's why they call criminals outlaws, because criminals don't care about the law. But at the end of the day, when it comes to us, we need to be very weary of what's going on. We need to turn off the TV. We need to learn how to trust each other. Certainly, I have my fair share of solutions. I have my opinions. I've been out there in those streets as well. I see what's going on every day. But we need to have that same outrage when it comes to black on black crime. And when we protest, we don't need to loot. Again, what is going inside a Target, a Walmart, have to do with Brother Floyd's death? Has nothing to do with Brother Floyd's death. But at the end of the day, many of us as African Americans were angry, but we're not taking our anger out on the right issues. What about fatherless homes? What about the welfare system? The government. Talk about real white supremacy, it's the government. And too many African Americans vote for big government. Big government is not the answer. Now again, the murders of Brother Aubrey and Brother Floyd were unjustified. But you also have to look at the murders of blacks from other blacks, that 80% of them don't get solved, and they're in the urban areas. But there's no outrage. There's no outrage for the single motherhood. There's no outrage for the welfare state in the African American community. You have people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. They want to get themselves on camera when it comes to high profile white on black crimes, but they're not in the community talking about black on black crimes. And the leadership in the African American community, particularly these black pastors, it's dead. It's all about money. And the leaders, just like the Democratic Party, they use black people as well. But a number of black people don't see that. So as average black men and women, we need to understand the system. It's not hard. We have to do more reading and be less emotional. And yes, we do have to fight. We're going to have to get blood on our hands, regardless of where you live. If you're in your job, understand what the policies are. Understand that you work your job and you start your own business. Understand the stock market. Understand the education system. You may have to homeschool your kids. But I'm telling you, at the end of the day, when it comes to black on black crime, there is no real outrage. And that's troubling, because the problems that we have in the African American community, most of them we can solve ourselves. But many of us don't want to. Many of us love the drama. See it on YouTube. You see the doxing. There's no outrage for that. You see the name calling. You see us as African American men and women on YouTube who don't know how to disagree with one another. We'll never get anything done if we keep being savage against one another. So, I'm going to ask you this. At the end of the day, do you want freedom? Or do you want tyranny? Leave your answer in the comment section under my video. Because at the end of the day, I want freedom. Freedom takes sacrifice. And at the end of the day, freedom is what we need. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. Also check out the Mind of STEM channel. On that channel, I talk about science, technology, engineering, and math, and I give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math from a engineering perspective. Also, you can check out my Blog Talk Radio show. I had a good Blog Talk Radio show. It's up on my Facebook page. And if you can't find me on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, you can always find me on Twitter and Facebook. But again, I just want to say to the African American community, particularly the brothers, let's talk more about what's going on and less about women, because we are at a civil war right now. Many of you don't know it. So, I'll leave you with this. Be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Thank you for listening and viewing this video from the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. Once again, my name is Leon Jones. You have a wonderful and blessed day. I'm out.